Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have got two of Germany's best open top sports cars parked behind me. On the right we have a brand new 2019 BMW Z4 M40i supplied by trldeals and Berry BMW, so thanks a lot for that guys. And on the left we have an Audi UK press car, a TTRS Roadster, again a brand new facelifted model that has just been launched here in the UK. These are not just top of the range in their own right. The Z4 is a launch edition and the TTRS is also a sports edition. So lots to talk about and lots to have a look at. Let's have a quick look around both cars and then we're going to jump in the Z4 first, take that for a drive, and then the TTRS. And at the end, I'll hopefully have some kind of a verdict for you guys. The TTRS, as tested here, is about £15,000 more than the Z4 M40i, and both cars have got a very similar spec as well, but even in base trim the TTRS is about £8,000 more than the Z4 M40i. In its defense, it does have better performance figures and higher brake horsepower, but I'm hoping it can justify that massive price difference out on the road. The Z4 M40i has the now familiar B58 engine that we find in cars like the M140i. It's a limited edition Motec 1 of 12 car there, or cars like the M240i or 340i. Anything with the 40i in it tends to have the B58 engine. The B58 is a 3-litre twin-scroll straight six, producing 335 brake horsepower and 369 pound-foot of torque. This is all fed through the 275 section rear Michelin tyres, and that is through a, familiar to me at least, 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox. The Z4 M40i has a claimed 0 to 60 figure of 4.6 seconds and a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour. The TTRS, on the other hand, uses the latest version of Audi's glorious 2.5 litre turbocharged 5-pot. The engine that most of us think of is responsible for making the RS3 such a special car and really putting the RS3 on the map back in the day. Obviously this is now a heavily revised version of that engine that came out in roughly 2011 off the top of my head, and this one produces 395 brake horsepower but does have a slightly lower torque figure of 354 pound-foot of torque, so it is slightly down on the Z4 M40i, and both cars weigh roughly the same at just over 1,500 kilos. The TTRS has an all-wheel drive system, or quattro drive system, and that, along with the increased power over the Z4, gets this car from 0 to 60 in a claimed 3.9 seconds. Again, it has a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour, but this one has an option that lifts it to 174 miles an hour, and I've recently had the coupe version of this in Germany a couple of weeks ago on the Autobahn, and I can tell you that it had no problems hitting the top speed limiter. Having a quick look inside the interiors, I love all the blue trim and stuff on here, and it's just typically Audi in there. I go on about the TT interior a lot on my channel, and in fact it is one of my favourite interiors. We'll talk about some of the driving ergonomics that aren't brilliant later when we get the car on the road, but in terms of aesthetics and the way it looks, it's just superb. And this has the fantastic, from what I can tell, R8 steering wheel in there with some Alcantara on it. It's just a lovely, lovely place to sit, lovely place to be. When we head over to the BMW, it's a massively improved interior, so people that, you know, go on at BMW for having dated interiors, etc. The 8 Series, the new Z4, cars like the new 3 Series, they have really lifted their game, and I think it's fantastic in here. The seats are fantastic, seats are beautiful, the interior is lovely, the driving position most importantly is pretty much spot on, has the very latest operating system 7. It really is a fantastic car and a bit of a game changer. Obviously it's a bit dark and a bit German looking in here compared to the lovely sort of blue detailed TTRS over there, but it's a lovely place to sit and be, and obviously this just happens to have black leather. You could change that and have your own spec and your own trim. Right, I think we should head out in the Z4 M40i first, because I've been in this car for the past 3 or 4 days and done quite a few mixed miles in it. We're now inside the Z4 M40i. Typical that I decided to do a twin test of convertibles on a day like today. It looks like it could rain any second. Fingers crossed that it doesn't. Before we start, just want to say a big shout out to my brand trldeals.com. Make t-shirts like the one I'm wearing. Please head over and check out our website. There's a link in the description below. Also want to say a massive thanks and shout out, a surprise shout out to Oakley Sunglasses, who very kindly sent me some new glasses, not just one pair either, so massive thanks. And I think if brands like Oakley that I've supported and followed and loved for the past 30 years are sending me glasses, then I must be doing something right, so thank you very much. I'm literally overwhelmed and overjoyed. I'm going to shoot both cars the same way, so roof off, windows up, wind deflector up, and we're going to do the same route, and I'm hopefully going to go through the same thing and cover the same sort of stuff. So as we're just cruising along here, I think it would be rude not to start with a bit of a noise check underneath this bridge here. We're on a de-restricted road here, or national speed limit road. I'll just drop it down, there's nothing coming into second. There's no denying that the B58 sounds great. Obviously this being a 2019 car, it's stuffed up with all sorts of OPF filters and cats and all the rest of it. The exhaust, I dread to think what it looks like, probably pretty similar to the one on my M2 Comp, but somehow it still manages to produce some decent sound. So hats off to BMW for that. And just cruising around, it really does sound like a typical straight 6 BMW, which is exactly what you want. And I know a lot of straight 6s are disappearing. The new M135, for instance, is going to have a 4-pot, so let's enjoy this engine while we can. Does it feel special in here? Well, to me it feels very special. I love BMW interiors, not always or so much because of the aesthetics of them, but more so because of the way they feel, the touch points, the driving position, things like that. And this being a convertible, I remember when I first drove it out in Spain at the end of last year, I was worried that the H point where I sit would be too high because I'm 6'4", but thankfully I sit nice and low. I'm looking through the windscreen. I don't feel like my head's poking out the top like it does in a lot of convertibles. I feel like I'm driving around in a noddy car, but it's not too bad at all. It feels really nice in here. The fit and finish is typically brilliant in a BMW, but also things like the tech. So this has got the brand new operating system 7, so it's the same as what's in the 8 series and the new X5, the new 3 series. It's just a fantastic latest version of the already brilliant iDrive. So I'm still getting to grips with the way it works, but it's really nice. We've got a full digital dash, touch screen, massive screen in the middle of the sort of dashboard there that doesn't stick out too much, doesn't look like it should be folded down when the car's off, etc. It just fits in and flows very nicely with the dashboard. I've got a lovely head-up display in this car as well, which is just brilliant. I mean, there's nothing in here that I'm left wanting option-wise. It's got Harman Kardon sound, it's got the best nav, like I said, it's got literally everything I need and I want, including the head-up display. Next thing on my agenda is cabin noise. So let's just get up on this national speed limit road up to 70 miles an hour, which it does just like that. So what's it like? So that's 70 miles an hour now. What's it like cabin wise? Well, I can just feel a little bit of wind across the top of my head, but clearly not much because my sunglasses are still sitting there. But otherwise it's really nice. I can't feel any around my shoulders. I feel quite encloseted by the windows and stuff. Yeah, it feels great. I don't feel blown about in here, and I certainly don't feel like I'm doing 70 miles an hour. And the fact that you guys can hear me, hopefully, just proves the point that, yeah, the sound in here, or the lack of disturbance from the wind, is absolutely brilliant. Coming up to a roundabout now. I'm in Sport Plus, so it's a stiffer ride. Heavy steering, overly heavy steering. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's just throw it through here. So this Volvo is probably going to cut across into my lane. Yep. It feels fantastic. I mean, it's a rear-wheel drive BMW with close to 350 horsepower. The chassis feels very stiff. I feel very connected to the car as well. Remember, there's no roof, so even in modern convertibles these days, the majority of them, you feel disconnected to the car. The steering feels like it's on a slightly different chassis to the seat, if that makes sense. Older convertibles were terrible for that, but they're still not perfect, except for in cars like, say, the modern Boxster and stuff, where you almost can't believe that you've got no roof because it just feels so stiff, or McLarens, obviously, because they're on carbon tubs, etc. But this feels really sturdy. It controls its weight very well, so there is some trickery going on, and I can feel it when I push it through corners to keep this car very flat, but it just feels great, feels really good. Unfortunately, as I talked about in my original review of this car out in Spain, that when you're in Sport or Sport Plus, the steering is just well overweighted, in my opinion. It just feels really overweighted. We'll do one lap of this roundabout, centre forward. I'm in South Bucks, so the roads are terrible, very bumpy, but we're on fantastic Michelin Pilot Super Sport tyres. As I load it up, it's not pushing. I can feel the whole car just started to move. As I got towards the limits of the grip, the whole car just started to push then. Not the front end, not the back end. It just, 50-50 weight distribution. I think this is very close to it, so typically BMW in that sense, fantastic. But yeah, steering feel, really not, no. And also, just the width of the wheel, the width of the girth of the actual rim of the steering wheel, it's too fat. It's just too fat. And I know, looking at Instagram, people are obsessed with having fat rim steering wheels, but trust me guys, there's nothing worse for feel and everything. And my hands are huge, so I don't know, maybe that's just me. In terms of performance, it does feel fast. It doesn't feel lightning fast, but it feels fast, and I'm going to get in the TTRS again soon, but I've had that for the past 3 or 4 days, and this doesn't feel like it's lacking any power or torque especially. We know it's not lacking any torque, and in fact it's got more torque than the TTRS. Let's have another sound test as we're going underneath. Lovely. You get some really nice pops on the downshift, which you probably won't hear. 4th, 3rd, 2nd. Really nice. Now I'm going to do a roof test. I'm going to count how quick the roof comes up. So this is very unscientific, but I don't care. Right, ready, steady, go. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. About 13 seconds unscientifically. 13 seconds. Not too bad. Okay, we got the roof back off now, just cruising along. I just want to talk about the fact that I think this car for just over £50,000 is an absolute bargain. It really does offer good value for money, especially when you put it up against the TTRS that we're about to jump in. For me, I would still have an M2 competition, which is basically identical money, but that's just because I want performance, ability, you know, I want a real sports car. Although if I had the money, I'll definitely have a convertible and maybe one of these in my dream garage. Like all cars, there are some bad points with this car, and I wanted to run over them because I think it's only fair that I run over the bad points in this car and I run over the bad points in the TTRS. One of the bad points that I have talked about already is the lack of steering feel and the fact that the actual rim of the wheel itself is just too fat. There's no need for it, and the first thing I would do if I had this car is probably take it down to Jacket Royal steering wheels and get the wheel retrimmed with about 20% less padding in it, because it's just too fat and it takes away some of the tiny bit of steering feel that is left in this electronic unit. So steering feel is not great. In comfort it is better, and you can configure that. I just haven't had time to do that today. So you can have comfort steering when you're in sports individual, for instance, so the louder exhaust, the better throttle pickup, etc. The other thing I'm not massively and totally convinced with in this car is the looks. It's looks objective. I think from some angles it's stunning. With the roof off it's really good, with the roof on I'm not sure, but its looks, I just don't know. I don't know if they've got it 100% right, but that's just modern BMW styling for you. I don't think really they've nailed many cars except for maybe the 8 Series or more specifically the M8. But saying that, the 3 Series is growing on me quite a lot, so I think this is a grower, this car, and I'd love to see them build a full fat M version of it, and I'm sure that would look the absolute business. But yeah, looks are objective, and I'm just not 100% sold on these. The other thing I'm not that pleased about with this specific car is the actual trim that's in here. This trim in the middle, it just kind of lets down the rest of the cabin. It's a trim that you'd kind of expect to find in a French car maybe 15 or so years ago, and I just don't think it does the rest of the cabin justice. We've got some lovely black piano trim down here. Everything else is really smart, but you can change that. So that's just this specific spec in this specific car. If that was all black or all silver or something, it would look a lot better. Other than that, I think this is just a fantastic car, and as I say, for the money, I think it offers very, very good value for money. And it does sound good. There's no denying that the straight six sounds fantastic. Right, let's jump into the TTRS Roadster and see how it compares to this car. But before we do, I just want to say a massive thanks once again to Tony Lewis and the Berry BMW group for giving me this car for the day to film. Really appreciate it, guys. Now you join me from inside the Audi TTRS Roadster. We'll start again with an under the bridge blast, bit of gap in the traffic behind me. Does it sound better? I think it might just. This is obviously the OPF filtered car, so it's not as loud as last year's TTRS Roadster, but it still sounds pretty good, and there's no mistaking that beautiful 5-pot warble that comes out of the two massive exhausts that actually have two smaller ones in each pipe. Again, what does it feel like in this TTRS? Does it feel special? Well, it does. All TTs feel special. I really like the layout. I like the simplicity of everything. I like the lack of screen. There is no head-up display, but there's the brilliant virtual cockpit. To me, I'm still a head-up display fan. I think that's where the future's going. The steering wheel is really, really nice. It's trimmed in Alcantara, sort of at the 2/4 parts of the wheel, so where you hold it, the actual rim itself is a lot narrower than the one in the Z4, which I didn't particularly like. It's not the wheel itself in the Z4 that I don't like, it's just the rim. And because the rim's so fat, it takes some of the feel away, and there is more steering feel in this car over the Z4. Can you believe it? An Audi RS product with more steering feel than a BMW product. But yes, it definitely does have more feel, and I think a lot of that has got to do with a slightly narrower and more direct rim, so it just feels better. Everything else in here is good. Seating position is not as good, especially for someone of my height, and I go on about this a lot with Audis, and I don't know why. Audis seem to design their cars across the range pretty much for smaller people. Now I'm 6'4", I don't fit in these beautiful seats, unfortunately. I'm not supported properly, and I feel a bit like I am in an Audi car in this car, whereby the seat is at its absolute minimum or lowest point, and my head is basically feels like it's sitting in line with the top of the windscreen, which isn't ideal. That brings me on to the next point. So what we'll do is we'll get up to 70 miles an hour here, just like we did in the Z4. Got the wind deflector up. That's motorised in this car, so you can put it up or down. Now let's get to 70 miles an hour. I'm already feeling that I'm shouting. I can feel wind here all around the back of my ears. I can feel it on my t-shirt, that's probably blowing around a little bit. I can feel it down the back of my neck. I can feel it just circulating everywhere, and that's mostly to do with the fact that I'm actually sitting up here, because if I sat down here it's a little bit better, but it's still nowhere near as good as when you're in the Z4. There's a lot more turbulent air rushing around the cabin, that is without a doubt. We're coming into a roundabout. We're in dynamic, just as we were in the BM. I was in Sport Plus in that car. So we'll come in here, see what it feels like. I've actually got the traction control set to halfway, because you kind of tend to get, it's a bit over-intrusive in this car. So we'll pile it in. Okay, so the front end started to move around a bit then, but it still felt very, very good. So yeah, it felt good. It felt reasonably compliant, but the ride in this car, when in comfort, isn't bad. This has got magnetic ride, but it's nowhere near as good as it is in the Z4 when you're in comfort. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the Z4 has got much bigger profile tyres, so therefore it just gives you that bit of extra cushioning, whereas this car has got really low profile tyres that look great to most people on the rims, but really they just give the suspension no chance on the smaller sort of bumps that we find loads of in this particular area. Right, again, we'll do a couple of loops of this. So just pile it in here. Let's see what happens when we get near the sort of maximum grip levels. So we're on Pirellis in this car, and actually there's a hell of a lot of grip, but I can feel the front pushing as soon as I really load it up. Whereas in the BMW I can feel it neutralising. So I kind of guessed that would happen because we're in a Quattro, and that's what tends to happen, unfortunately, unless you're in really slippery conditions and you're a bit aggressive with the steering and you manage to get weight over the nose, then you can get this car to rotate a little bit. In fact, we experienced that in a very slippery dry field the other day, that if you drive it properly it will act a bit like a rear bias car, but fundamentally it's still a very equal bias Quattro system in my opinion. So performance wise, yeah, it does feel very similar once you're on the move. Obviously off the line, this has got the all-wheel drive quattro, which allows it to literally lay all of its 395 horsepower down and rocket off down the road. But it doesn't have the torque that the B58 does in the Z4, and you do notice that. I'll hopefully demonstrate actually coming up here now. So I'll put it into third. We're at 1600 RPM. I'll put my foot on the floor. There's nothing. There's nothing. 2.5, 3, and then it starts pulling. And actually, unlike turbocharged engines, or unlike many turbocharged engines, this one really gets in its stride at about 5,000, and it will go all the way out to the red line at about 6.8. Quite happily, and it encourages you to do that, in fact, and we'll demonstrate that off the lights in a minute because we're in a 40 zone right now. So it is quite a flexible linear power curve on this turbocharged engine, but anything below about 2,500 RPM and it's just really laggy, and far more so than it is in the TTRS Coupe that I had a few weeks ago, which is about 100 kilos less, and that's probably exactly what it's down to, because torque is good at carrying weight around. This car is 100 kilos more. It's like having another Joe sitting next to me. But even at 3,000 RPM, I'm in second now, foot on the floor. It takes a while for it to spool up, but then when it does, and once you've got it in boost and you're accelerating, it's really, really good. This has got the dual clutch gearbox as opposed to the ZF 8-speed in the BMW. Which one do I prefer? To be honest, I probably prefer the ZF. Yes, this is maybe a fraction quicker on upshifts especially, but the 8-speed is so good at being an automatic when you just want to put it in drive and let the gears change themselves, that it kind of shows the SG box up a little bit. But there's very little between them. They've both got their pros and cons, gearbox wise. MPG, I'm not sure what the quoted figures are, but to me they both seem to produce very similar figures on the combined run, which is impressive, because I know when this 2.5 originally came out, it was a thirsty beast, but yet I managed to average high 30s on the way out to the Nürburgring in the coupe version only a couple of weeks ago, and I think that's very impressive for a 2.5 litre that produces nearly 400 horsepower. One thing I haven't done is time the roof. So let's try the roof up timing by Joe Achilles. Here we go, ready, steady, go. Well, I worked that out to be exactly, well, between 12 and 13 seconds, which is exactly what the Z4 was, but it does feel a little bit quicker and it feels a bit less fussy, and it also tends to do it every time I ask it to do it, whereas the Z4 sometimes hesitates, regardless of whether the fact I'm going slow enough to operate the actual roof system. Let's talk about some of the bad points of this car as we navigate our way down this very narrow country lane. As I've mentioned, the driving position's really not brilliant for someone of my height. The seats are not great. There is less storage, or effective and useful storage, in this car, because on the Z4 you've actually got a nice little shelf back here that you can throw a few extra bits and bobs on. They've both got a nice through load system into the boot, but the actual cabin storage isn't quite as good. I think boot space is very similar. But something else ergonomically that's not right with this and the TTRS, or any TT in fact, coupe or roadster, is the ergonomics of where you put your arms on long distance. Now, I like to rest my elbows on the door card and on the center armrest, but in these cars it's impossible. You're nowhere near the door card or the armrest, so I find myself your arms get a bit tired on long journeys because you don't have anywhere to actually effectively rest them, and that does become a bit of an issue on longer journeys. The other thing that offends me a little bit on this particular car is it's a £68,500 car and it doesn't have a reversing camera. And I really think that all convertibles should have reversing cameras as standard these days, because they are almost impossible to reverse with the roof up, because you lose so much vision with bits of fabric, etc., that usually wear a bit of glasses, so you're very limited. It does have parking sensors, but in this day and age, you've got your virtual cockpit there, etc., etc. This is loaded with options, but it doesn't have a reversing camera, which is very weird. And that brings me on to the conclusion of this twin test. Now, both cars are fantastic, and if they were priced at the same price point, I would have a bit of a struggle choosing, you know, one over the other, because I think they both got their plus and minus points. But seeing as this one, as tested at least, is £15,000 more than the Z4, that boggles my mind, and it seems to have less options like reversing cameras, etc., for that money. I just can't get my head around that, and you know, that alone makes me sort of veer towards the Z4. But it's not only that, I actually think even if these cars were priced the same, the Z4 M40i is a slightly better package. It drives slightly better, it's got a few less flaws, it suits someone as tall as me much better, the seats, the cabin, the driving position. So I think I would be mad not to go for that. I would miss the 5-pot and the character of this car. I would miss this really cool cabin layout, even though it's a bit more old school than, say, the one in the Z4. I do think it's cool, and I'd miss things like the blue details, and it does look good, this car. But you know, if it was my car, ownership, etc., I would personally take the Z4 M40i over the TTRS Roadster. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave any comments, questions below. Let me know which car you would take out these two in the comments below, because I'm keen to hear your feedback on that. As I say, check out my Control and Shift website for all merchandise, etc. And hopefully I'll see you guys at the next video very soon. Thanks for watching. Cheers.